Arrests and brawling outside Ferguson Police Department as two officers are injured in gunfire at a protest rally in the racially strained American city. Coming up too this hour, using refugees as blackmail from Europe to Australia. Nations are threatening each other these days with a flood of illegal immigrants as their arguments escalate. European lawmakers called for an international investigation into the murder of Russian opposition figure Boris Nemtsov. And Libya's reconciliation talks fail, threatening further chaos and hampering chances of getting Gaddafi's son handed over for trial in The Hague. Hello, live from the RT News Centre with Kevin Owen. Thanks for being with us. It's just after 3 in the afternoon now here in Moscow. Our top story that two police officers have been shot outside Ferguson Police Station in Missouri in the United States. The incident happened during skirmishes at a protest rally nearby. Well, that rally and the shootings followed the resignation of the city's police chief, who is the 6th official in Ferguson now to quit or be fired in the wake of the killing of that unarmed black teenager, Michael Brown, last year. Latest details now then from RT's Ghani Chichikam.
St. Louis County Police Chief said one officer was shot in the face and one in the shoulder. He said both suffered very serious gunshot injuries but were conscious. He said, quote, "These police officers were standing there and they were shot just because they were police officers." This happened as protesters had gathered outside the Ferguson Police Department Wednesday night to cheer the resignation of the city's police chief, Thomas Jackson.
We saw the muzzle fire from the gun up top of the street, and so we all kind of just ducked down. And once we ducked down, we saw the cop was shot right next to us. Last
week, Justice Department issued a report damning the city's policing tactics for disproportionately targeting African Americans. It was the shooting of the black unarmed teenager Michael Brown that set off the protests in this investigation. But the protests were a reaction not just to the killing of Michael Brown, but also to the systematic problems in the police force and to the racial bias in the police force. And this Justice Department report has spoken to that. But the hope of the government was to somehow, with this report, to kind of restore the trust of the public in the police force. But as we see from the shootings in Ferguson, Ferguson continues to be a powder keg.
Well, we're keeping a close eye on developments in Ferguson for you, and we'll update you as any further details emerge. Another big story brewing today. Keeping out illegal immigrants is a headache for countries worldwide and the root of many cross-border disputes right now too. Scenes like these appear regularly around the world, from Europe to America to Asia. In some countries, though, now the threat of swamping others with unwanted migrants is becoming a political tool to settle scores, among them Indonesia, which is threatening to bombard Australia with illegal immigrants as relations between the countries deteriorate.
If Canberra keeps doing things that displease Indonesia, Jakarta will surely let the illegal immigrants go to Australia. It will be like a human tsunami.
Well, such threats are becoming quite the bargaining chip in political quarrels elsewhere too, as Polly Boyker's been finding out.
There's a new political weapon being wielded by countries: the threat of unleashing an immigrant invasion. Take, for example, Greece. The country's defence minister, Panos Kimenos, has threatened to allow millions of economic migrants crossing its border to travel into Europe if Brussels fails to stop Greece crashing out of the Eurozone. Bolstering his political leverage, or what many would simply call blackmail, was the politician's observation that there'd probably be some jihadists from Islamic State among those travelling to the continent.
Well, the worst-case scenario is terrorists are allowed free access into the European Union and then can plan and execute terrorist actions very easily.
And the terrorists themselves are using the new political weapon. Last month, Islamic State threatened to flood Europe with 500,000 migrants from Libya if the West intervened militarily in the region. Telephone intercepts in Italy revealed that the extremist organisation was threatening a psychological attack, sending hundreds of thousands of people out to sea in boats that would overwhelm rescue services and provoke riots in Europe.
I mean, I think it is very much psychological than real. No one knows how many people are going to come to Europe via Libya, but those people are primarily migrants, you know, asylum seekers, people trying to escape the carnage. So I think it's actually trying to play on this fear of asylum seekers and migrants, which is being stoked up across Europe.
Over in Britain, anti-immigration party UKIP is set to make massive gains at the general election. With public services such as the health system increasingly stretched, immigration is on the minds of many voters here. And at the same time, the government is trying to keep Britain's door closed to an increasing number of asylum seekers who are gathering across the Channel. In the French town of Calais, some 2,500 migrants have set up camp by the port, trying to make their way to Britain. Local authorities there are so frustrated with the situation and Britain's unwillingness to take them in that they've floated the idea of buying all the migrants' ferry tickets to come to the UK. The British government has helped to fund a large barbed wire fence around the ferry terminal, though, to keep illegal immigrants from stowing themselves away in lorries bound for Britain. So for any political forces willing to employ it, the threat of a wave of migrants seems to have become the perfect bogeyman. Polly Boyko, RT, London.
Libya faces a rising threat of further civil war as factions controlling various parts of the country failed to meet for UN-led talks on Wednesday. The government, which currently controls only a few key cities now, decided to postpone the negotiations. Libya has been engulfed in chaos since the NATO-backed rebellion saw the killing of leader Muammar Gaddafi. One notable person caught up in the anarchy is his son, Saif, who still can't get a proper trial. Saif al-Islam has been locked up now for almost 3.5 years by rebels in the town of Zintan, who refused to hand him over to central authorities. Before the revolution, he was Libya's second most powerful figure. He controlled, in fact, the flow of the Libyan Investment Authority, a sovereign fund worth up to $100 billion in his day. He's also got a PhD from the London School of Economics and attracted some pretty influential friends in Britain. But now he faces the death penalty at the hands of rebels and is accused of crimes against humanity. We last spoke to him in 2011 at the time of the NATO invasion.
This country is a piece of cake, rich, full of gas, oil, and we have more than $100 billion deposits abroad, so we have to share this cake. That's it. And we have to get off Mr. Gaddafi because he's the only obstacle between us and the cake. It's as simple as that.
Well, we went on to contact the International Criminal Court to find out how officials view the situation there. They told us there's little that can be done because neither the Libyan authorities nor anyone else can be blamed for this delay in serving justice right now.
Libya has failed to comply with the requests by the court to surrender Saif al-Islam Gaddafi to the court. Throughout the proceedings, Libya demonstrated in several respects its commitment to the court and made genuine efforts to maintain a constructive dialogue. The chamber also noted the volatile political and security situation in Libya and stated that it was sensitive to the serious difficulties that Libya is currently facing.
I spoke to John Jones. He's a lawyer for Saif Gaddafi. He told me that Western nations lack the political will to get Gaddafi out of rebel hands.
The International Criminal Court has said 2 years ago that Saif Gaddafi should be delivered to The Hague, and the ICC has made a report of non-compliance by Libya to the Security Council. And so the real focus where pressure could be applied would be by the Security Council actually passing a resolution in relation to Libya's non-compliance, and that hasn't happened. And so the problem is, well, there's I detect a lack of political will on the part of major Western governments, including the UK, France and the US, to actually tackle this and to deal with Libya.
Muammar Gaddafi's wife, his only daughter and 2 other sons have also gone missing. Some reports suggest that they're in hiding somewhere in Algeria or Oman. Another son, meantime, Saadi, is also reportedly in custody in Libya, awaiting trial with his brother Saif. Coming up, after 6 months in orbit, 3 crew members from the International Space Station are back, safely I must say. They include the first Russian woman since Soviet times, all touched down in their Soyuz capsule in Kazakhstan. We report later from Mission Control. Plus, Britain tells France to grow up after Paris blocks a commemorative coin to mark 200 years since its defeat at the Battle of Waterloo. Full story, full battle, coming up.
Cameron talks about his long-term economic plan, that they want to stick to it, and I don't know why he would, because it's generating poverty. So if the plan is to create poverty, then he's succeeding. If the plan is to create some kind of growth, then he is failing.
Crosstalk rules in effect. That means you can jump in anytime you want.
Again, developing story to tell you about now. The European Parliament is urging an international investigation into the murder of Russian opposition figure Boris Nemtsov. Voting, in fact, just wrapped up in Strasbourg. RT's Lizzie Phelan can tell us how that vote.
Independent investigation into the death of Russian opposition politician Boris Nemtsov, which they voted for. The resolution that they voted for described the killing as the most significant political murder in recent Russian history. Now, the resolution was also filled with very harsh words towards the government, which we also saw when they were discussing Nemtsov's killing yesterday in the parliament. Let's take a quick look at that.
The Russian leaders are that has been created against Russian opposition figures by the Kremlin.
Now, those comments come amidst the growing climate of Russian bashing, not just from politicians, but also from the Western media, where we're seeing the Russian government described as an authoritarian government, as a dictatorship, with Russian President Vladimir Putin increasingly being characterized as a tyrant. Now, at the same time, we're also seeing MEPs calling for a constructive dialogue with Russia, which is going to be increasingly difficult amidst such a hostile stance from some European parliaments and media.
All right, Lizzie, thanks for the update there. Let's get some more thoughts on this now from political analyst Alexander Pavic is joining us. Hi, Alexander. This is about the murder, first and foremost, of a Russian citizen in Russia. I mean, if this happened anywhere else, people would be jumping up and down, you know, saying we need an international investigation in Britain. The Brits would want to carry out the investigation. So why, just because this has happened in Russia, has this kicked off so much? Can we not at least wait for the Russian invasion to finish first before there are calls for an international investigation if people aren't happy still?
Unfortunately, this is breathtaking in its hypocrisy. I read the resolution just now, and it's in collision with itself, because paragraph 4 of the resolution calls on all actors to refrain from using the murder of Nemtsov for political purposes. And clearly, what this resolution is all about. You know, further, this resolution condemns the propaganda war that's heating up between the EU Russia, the Ukraine, and the deteriorating atmosphere that is causing. This is precisely what this resolution is doing. It's hype the propaganda war and worsening the atmosphere in general.
And of course, in some countries, at the very least, you'd be prejudicing a case by calling somebody guilty of a murder before they've even been tried or there's any investigation into it. Anyway, the EU's resolution here also condemns what it calls a lack of freedom of expression in Russia, even though, of course, there was so much coverage of it here on all of the Russian media. It made the front pages and the headlines every day for many, many days, and still is.
This is really the pot calling the kettle black. I mean, how freely can you discuss in the West, for example, the lack of clarity regarding the investigation of just the Charlie Hebdo murders recently? You know, let's go back to all sorts of political assassinations taking place in the West over the past decades. Let's go back to the killing of Dr. David Kelly in 2003, when he put into question Blair's lies regarding the pretext for the Iraq War. I mean, there's so much baggage in the West, and they're just trying to pass it along to Russia, just exactly to use the murder of Nemtsov for political purposes.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, back to this case now. As I was saying, stress again to our viewers around the world, there is a criminal investigation already underway. It is far from complete. It still continues. Why the impatience from everybody outside? I mean, maybe if it was 6 months hence and still nothing had happened, okay, you may expect some people to pipe up abroad. But why this impatience so quickly? It's just purely down to politics, you think, not in the cause of greater justice.
Absolutely, it's political, and it's worse than that. It's just not petty politics. This is also a way to torpedo the fragile ceasefire in the Ukraine. You know, this is a way to worsen the atmosphere. I mean, you had Russia in the first place, also Germany and France, working really hard to make it work with ceasefire in the Ukraine. And you need to develop an atmosphere regarding Ukraine.
OK, we've got to leave it there. Thanks for your time, Alexander. Alexander Pavic, political analyst. Appreciate it. Now, another talk about France has won a battle of Waterloo against Belgium, at least a monetary one right now. This year sees the 200th anniversary of the historic Battle of Waterloo, in which British-led forces beat Napoleon. Now, to mark the bicentenary, Belgium submitted a design for a €2 coin. But Paris was and got it withdrawn. France complained to the European Council that the coin would be a negative symbol for the French people, as well as appearing prejudicial, with the potential to cause hostility. British MPs have been amused by the gripe, telling the French to grow up and get over the defeat. After all, it was 1815. Here's Anastasia Churkina.
Want to learn how to keep a grudge for 2 centuries? Turns out France may be able to teach you. Back in the day when France, Belgium and Britain were not all part of the same bloc called the European Union, in 1815 Napoleon was defeated in the Battle of Waterloo. Fast forward 200 years, Belgium, where the battle took place, says, wouldn't it be nice to issue a commemorative coin to mark the big anniversary? But an emotionally fragile France says, hold it, we were defeated, so the coin is offensive to our people. It would only bring back bad memories.
This is an age of French grandeur, of French influence, French Europe, effectively. And actually what Waterloo represents is a rolling back on that, a change in the tide of controlling Europe, of influencing Europe, of all these sorts of things. So we can really see why it smarts, why it hurts, why it might offend the national dignity.
But isn't a coin just a coin, and isn't France simply overreacting?
Well, I don't know why they're so sensitive. What's the problem? They're full of themselves, sometimes. 200 years ago. Should be used to it by now.
With calls from all over the EU for France to grow up and show some team spirit, perhaps the French should flip a coin to decide if they should move on instead of flipping out. Anastasia Churkina, RT, London.
Update on a story we brought you yesterday. At least 25 people remain trapped under the debris of a shopping mall in Sochi. A deadly fire broke out there at that complex in the city of Kazan Wednesday, in which 4 people are confirmed now to have died and dozens of others were injured as well. Egonov's got the latest.
Well, this story is still ongoing. The rescue operation is still continuing. According to the latest from the Emergencies Ministry, Around 20 people could still remain under the rubble there. 4 people have been confirmed killed by this fire. Dozens of others have been injured, including 16 people who still remain in hospital. It started yesterday and was so powerful that it took up to 8 hours for firefighters to put it out. Investigators say that the fire started inside one of the cafes inside that mall. Its owners reportedly tried to put it out themselves but failed. And it's also believed that fire safety rules could have been violated in the mall's construction, since a lot of the materials used are highly flammable.
A wave of unrest has gripped the Turkish capital, where protesters clashed with police to mark the death of a teenager a year ago. Demonstrators blocked through rocks, Molotov cocktails and fireworks at officers who responded in turn with water cannon and tear gas. At least 11 people were arrested during the street battles. It's rooted in the 15-year-old a year ago who'd spent a long period in a coma after being struck on the head with a tear gas canister during the 2013 Gezi Park protests. Investigation into his death is ongoing. A cement factory's collapsed in Bangladesh. It's killed at least 4 workers inside. Rescuers have so far saved 40 others, though, from the debris, but more than 100 are still feared trapped. Bangladesh has a poor record for building safety. A similar tragedy, the closed factory near the capital in 2013, killed more than 1,100 workers. French football fans are celebrating a shock win against Britain's Chelsea after Paris Saint-Germain sent them crashing out of the Champions League. The game ended in a 3-all tie, but the Parisians get through an aggregate and into the quarter-finals. PSG were down to 10 men for most of the match after star player Zlatan Ibrahimovic was sent off just half an hour after kick-off. More celebrations. The latest return to Earth of a crew from the International Space Station was something of a rough ride for the 2 Russian cosmonauts and an American astronaut. Those who were keeping track of the landing were a bit alarmed for a while about the bad weather. Messages of foggy and overcast conditions in Kazakhstan kept popping up on Twitter. And in another nail-biting twist, too, there was a bit of a communications blackout for a minute, but fortunately, it was only temporary. Despite all that, the crew did make it back safely to Earth. There to greet them, Anna Julia Hedges.
Expedition 41, which launched back in September 2014, have safely made their homebound journey back to Earth. On board the Soyuz space rocket were Russian cosmonaut Alexander Samokutyaev, Yelena Sirova, as well as NASA's astronaut Barry Wilmore. Now, Yelena Sirova is actually the first ever Russian female cosmonaut to have made the trip to the International Space Station, and this is something that triggered the attention of the media, and she actually became a very popular figure even before making her trip onto space.
There is no such profession as a woman cosmonaut or a man cosmonaut. You can be a cosmonaut researcher or a cosmonaut explorer. They must have certain skills and characteristics for this profession. Otherwise, it's simply impossible to do what's required. During one survival course, I lost 5 kilos just in 2 days.
In recent days, the weather has actually been worsening. There is currently snow on the ground where the Soyuz rocket has landed. However, this did not prevent it from making it a perfectly punctual as well as safe landing. Now that the trio has returned home, there remain 3 astronauts back on the International Space Station. However, on the night between the 27th and the 28th of March, they will be joined by a new crew, and 2 of the new members, including a Russian cosmonaut and an American astronaut, will actually remain on the ISS for a full year in order to conduct experiments.
It's going to be a bit of a revolving door up there. The list of those who will soon check in at the ISS includes bringing a touch of showbiz to the stars too. British singer Sarah Brightman, no less, has been training here in Moscow and is expected to make the trip this autumn. She talks to Sophie Shevardnadze about her next big adventure.
This particular journey has been something that I've wanted to do most of my life. It was exciting just to be put through things like going into the centrifuge, altitude chamber, tip tables, the sort of rotating chair, and find out that I was capable of doing these particular things and not thrown by it. And it gave me a lot of strength inside and a lot of centre that I could deal with these things.
So you're going to be performing your first live concert from outer space.
What I'd love to do is sing something very simple and connect with either orchestra, choir, other singers on earth. And, you know, from that sort of space to earth connection.
25 minutes past 3 in the afternoon. Thanks for being with us wherever you're watching around the world. In today's Kaiser Report, right after this break, Max and Stacey are on the trail of Britain's disappearing middle class.
You talked a lot about ISIS, and you said that their ideology is a perversion of Islam. And while it's a very popular